are in my backyard for part 2 of our fall pruning series with Johnny Bolster from Lococopia. And he's going to be giving us a little bit of an idea of what we can do with this monstrosity of a tree. Last show, we did talk a little bit about pruning for fall, and it's very minimal, but I think you're going to probably have a little bit more work on this tree today.
Yeah.
You've got an apple tree in there somewhere.
Yeah.
You've got all kinds of grapevines growing on top of it, and I did notice that way up on top there's a few branches that are just screaming for the sky.
Yeah.
So you've got a big job ahead of you.
Oh, there's a lot going on.
There
here.
is, yeah. So.
It's a little unwanted companion planting.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with all those vines up there, the grapes, the apples, everything, it's just going to be way too much weight for it to handle. And if we had you know, an early snowfall, a wet snowfall like we did this year, it's going to break a lot of branches off. So we're going to have to reduce it, you know, for the long-term health of the plant.
Right. So this homeowner is looking to possibly have apples that will emerge next year, or maybe even the next year. It might take a couple of years, for it to come back.
That's right.
But what they're trying to do is get rid of some of these grapevines so that the apple tree can do what it does best instead of being a trellis.
Correct.
Right.
A lot of times people see these old trees out back and they're producing, you know, very minuscule apples. They assume it's a crab apple or it just doesn't produce anymore. But with a little bit of honing in, they definitely will produce some very succulent apples once again.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't look very healthy here, but this looks like a real apple, you know, and it could be very healthy. I mean, it wasn't, you know, pollinated all that well here, but, you know, it has potential.
Absolutely.
Good,
and regardless of its shape, it still tastes good.
You didn't get a worm, did you?
No.
Okay,
well, that's the protein, no big deal.
All right, so Johnny's going to be working on this tree. Anything else that you want to tell the public before you get started?
Oh, well, there's a few things I'd like to cover, just the basics of pruning.
Yep. So I'm going to let you talk.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. Now, one of the things that we want to look at first is all this lower stuff here. We want to be able to approach the tree well. So anything that's really obstructing your ability to get in at the tree can go. Most of this wood is dead wood, so you kind of just want to start at the end of a branch and just start breaking. And as long as you still hear snapping, then it's dead. Pretty good indication.
Doesn't look good.
No. So at this point, this whole branch is kind of all dead. And it's also jutting out from the center of the tree. Just like any other tree, we want to make sure that it's really open in the middle. It can breathe well, that the sunlight's getting down in there. So there's a possibility that we're going to just go ahead and take out a few of these lower branches, actually trunks, that are happening here right in the middle, just to give it a chance to kind of get that umbrella shape, the upside down umbrella shape that is really best for the tree. Again, I'm just going to keep snapping and seeing what can go and what can stay. With a big tree like this, we've got a couple other tools in the toolbox. This is just a regular pair of trimmers. It's capable of going through things about up to about a ½ inch without any trouble. A couple of the other ones that I've got here, and I'll be right back, is got a nice, what they call a Japanese arbor saw, and it's just got a nice kind of curve to it, and that's handy for getting a really good contact with the wood that's being cut through. And then I've got this other pair of pliers that it's got a little ratcheting action, and that's really handy, especially if you suffer from arthritis and don't have a lot of squeeze power. This makes it much easier to get through a thicker branch, similar to the way that a pair of limb loppers would. They all have their own roles, and if you're going to be doing a lot of pruning like this, it's worthwhile having all a wide variety of tools that can get the job done all the easier.
So do you think that this tree is worth saving?
Yeah, it absolutely is worth saving. What ends up happening here is it's kind of like reduction sculpting. You know, there is a beautiful apple tree in there. We just got to remove everything that isn't desirable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you think we're ready for you to get started?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm just going to point out a couple more things. Any of these branches that are coming real low like this are definitely going to have to be taken out because, unfortunately, it kind of gives a pathway for bugs and disease to make its way right up into the central trunk. So I'm basically just going to go all the way around and take off anything that's below, say about 3 feet. Anything that's growing straight down as well. We'll certainly be taking off a lot of these water shoots. You can see a lot of this very, very clustered small growth is called a water shoot, and its purpose is just to get up there and get as much sunlight as possible. None of that produces any fruit, so we'll certainly take that off. And then I'll probably be getting up into the tree a little bit, because we want those fruits to be accessible. The stuff that's way, way up there it's just going to hang out up there, and the only way to get it down is just give the tree a good shake. So for the sake of future harvest, we'll just take off the top of the tree. Anything basically above 10 foot we'll be lopping off.
Okay, so you're going to see something quite different after you're finished.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
Cool.
All right, well, I'm going to head out.
Okay.
And I'm going to let you go and do your thing.
I'll get to work.
Good luck.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks
All right.
a lot. Yeah.
Good.
See you, Jody.
See ya. Can you believe this? I feel like I was in a dream. In a split second, this tree changed from covered with grapevines and all kinds of branches to this little teeny spindly thing. But it looks like it's got a lot of potential now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's going to give it the chance to get all the sunlight it needs now, good airflow, and things will really start filling out over the next couple of years.
Excellent,
absolutely.
excellent. Yeah, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So if you have the time, that's what it's all about. You know, it doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen.
Totally. We just have to let the seasons do the magic.
Right.
Do the work for us.
Right. So I have a quick question. How was that apple that you tried?
It was delicious. Surprisingly delicious.
Wow.
You may look at the outside of these apples. There's black spots, sort of a mildew forming. Some of them are unshapely, but you open them up, and they're just beautiful, and the most delicious apples that you'll encounter are the ones that have just been left to their own devices. You know, no special sprays on them or anything like that.
Yeah.
So don't underestimate those wormy little looking apples. They really are delicious and have a lot to offer.
Yeah.
This apple right here is an example of where it hadn't really gotten a good pollination. So we have very low seed production inside.
I understand that this person is going to have bees next year because they've now got an apple tree that could provide a lot of apples.
Oh, so, yes, absolutely.
So when you do, as we've said this in another show, but this is a commercially grown apple, and this one has all kinds of seeds. Mm-hmm. So this tree will at some point have seeds in it that look like this and be covered with apples again. It's really exciting for this person. So what did you find on your journey of this apple tree?
Well, I found the same thing I find on a lot of old trees that have just started growing wildly. Is they become very they become very sparse. They tend to be very height oriented because they're trying to get up above these other trees that are blocking the sunlight. They put out a lot of water shoots. A lot of mold can form, black canker.
As you can see,
you see it growing around the apples. That's basically an example of where the fruit itself wasn't getting a lot of sunlight. It wasn't able to dry out well, and things like that. And have a little example where right on the bark you start to get kind of this white mildew. That's more of a mildew. Other examples would be the black canker, which it's unmistakable. It looks like the tree's been burnt, basically. You know.
Did you find any of that here?
Yeah, there was a little bit. Yeah.
It looks like it hasn't been taken care of for quite some time.
Yeah, it definitely hasn't been. My guess is it probably hasn't been trimmed in at least 10 years, if not more than that.
Well, in this area here, I think it probably got forgotten, and nobody really
Yep.
thought about it, and maybe
Right.
they didn't care about the apples.
Sure.
But you know, if you've got an apple tree in your yard, why not get apples?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
right.
it makes great applesauce or biting apple, you know,
Yep.
pie apples, whatever. It all depends on what kind of apple you have.
Even a bushel full is going to save you money at the grocery
Oh
store.
yeah, yeah. And again, no pesticides.
Right.
That's really important. You know,
Right.
there's so many things on the market right now that you have no idea the pesticides that you're eating. And so that's really great to know that
Yeah.
these didn't have anything.
And that might be a question for people. They say, okay, what now? What about spraying? What do
Right.
I do to make sure they have really good apples? And the thing that would be done is in the springtime, once buds actually start to come out, we're going to do a little bud reduction. We're going to go through and reduce by about 30 to 40% the buds that are out there. And that's going to make it so that the tree will be able to focus its attention on fewer apples, so they become larger and healthier.
So in the long run, you'll have more branches,
Right.
so you can have more apples. But you have
Yeah.
to just have a few apples so that it can be stronger and grow.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And as we continue to do bud reduction throughout, you know, from season to season, it becomes even more important to keep up with that because those apples are filling out. It's going to be more weight, and it's going to bear down on the branches.
Right, right.
So that's a danger.
So you did a lot of cutting here.
I sure
It
did.
looks like we've had like insects come in and
Yeah.
drill little holes or something. But
Yeah.
you know, again, it's going to be much healthier in the long
Absolutely.
run now
Absolutely.
that those
Yeah.
have been cut off a little bit.
Now, some of the more dramatic cuts that I've made of the trunks themselves were to bring it down so that everything was kind of reachable.
Yeah.
And you will find a lot of over like next year we'll find a lot of water shoots growing there because the trees. Thinking, oh, now I need to replace that
Right.
thing that's been taken.
Right.
And so you'll have to come through and you have to kind of snip away all those little shoots just to make sure that the energy is being focused into the branches that we want them to
Right,
be.
right.
Now, a word of caution, of course, is we are in the fall right now, and the pruning I've done here has been dramatic. But when you're dealing with a tree that's just so is wild, you're really not going to harm it. I mean, the worst case scenario is 50% of this decides to die, but we still got something left. There's still a substantial root system down
Right,
there,
right.
and we're going to get some really good apples
Yep.
for a long time. out
Excellent,
of it.
excellent.
Yeah.
So touch on Lococopia just a little bit and what you're
Sure.
doing, what it's all about.
Sure, sure. Well, this, in a nutshell, is what Lococopia does. We're seeking out trees in the area that we can rehabilitate, that we can revive, restore, and put back into in a healthy state of production so that there's food available for families in the Monadnock region.
Yeah, because there's a lot of food out there that just gets overlooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've so taken for granted our hinterlands that it's just gone to a state of disrepair, and,
Right.
and now we're almost dependent on foreign produce,
Right.
things coming from California and
Isn't that silly?
New Zealand and so on.
Yeah.
We've got a copious amount here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a matter of looking and finding. Because
Exactly.
I go by trees all the time, and there's so many apples on them. It just seems like such a waste. I hope that
That's right.
the deer eat them or the turkeys or something.
Right,
But
right.
you know, it just seems so sad to see
Yep.
so many trees
Right.
that don't get used.
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. And now what we've worked on today were just apples, but
Right.
it's important to point out that there is a cornucopia of fruits and vegetables out there. And Lococopia focuses on getting all these into a state of good production. We offer free clinics. We love to have people come out to our prunings to learn how to do it so they can go and continue the work
Great.
for us. Yeah, it saves
Great.
me. I'm only going to go so far with
I
these
know.
snippers.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
So how would they get a hold of you? Do you have a website or?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Best place to reach me by email is lococopia@yahoo, or you can reach us on Facebook
Okay.
at Lococopia.
Good, good,
Yeah.
good. So, you know, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Please feel free to ask Johnny. You know, contact him and see what you guys can do to work this all out. So,
Cool.
this has been great today. I know I can feel this. This tree is just saying thank you so much. It just had a huge massage, a deep
Yeah.
tissue massage. So,
little manicure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you very much, Johnny.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
and we'll see you in my backyard. Again, if you'd like to contact us and be on the show, the email address is inmybackyard ch8@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to consider you for being on the show or giving us a topic. Just give us a holler, and we'll see what we can do. So we'll see you again in my backyard. Hi, I'm Jody, and I'm in my backyard with Carl from the UNH Cooperative Extension Service. And we are going to talk a little bit about fall pruning on the scientific side and a little bit more about what they offer here at the service. So tell me a little bit more about this, Carl.
Okay. Well, my name's Karl Majewski, and I'm a ag resources educator with UNH Cooperative Extension. If I had to sum it up, it's I teach people how to farm better, and that's whether you're a large-scale commercial farm or a backyard gardener. It's my job to teach people how to get more out of their gardens, how to have more success with their gardens, or how to manage their fields, their gardens in a more environmentally friendly way.
Well, today we were working on a tree in my backyard, and Johnny Bolster is working on it right now as we speak. I can't wait to see what it's going to look like. But the reason that we did this fall pruning was this tree was a mess. And this is just an example. But this tree was a mess. And it had grapevines all over it. It had disease. It's a tree that nobody had taken care of for quite some time. So what we did, because we don't usually prune a whole lot in the fall, but what we did this time is we pretty much massacred this tree. It's going to come back. We know it is. But it's going to be healthier this time. It's going to have a chance to grow, and there's going to be a lot of light that's going to be able to come in so that the apples can really flourish.
Right.
So what would people want to do in the fall in order to anticipate what's going to happen in the winter? Do they want to do much pruning, or what would you suggest?
Well, there's no harm in pruning in the fall. You can, there's a saying that you can prune anytime that your tools are sharp. Okay, you're not going to hurt the tree at all.
But what I've heard is that if you do prune, that's going to mean that the plant's going to think that it needs to grow, that it's going to. This is what I read
Right.
someplace. So tell me a little bit more.
Well, if you were to prune really heavily, or if you were to prune very early in the spring, or I should say later in the spring, once the trees come out of dormancy, you can get a lot of regrowth, a lot of what they call water sprouts coming up, where you
Those
have
are those
these
ones
right.
that just pop up, right?
Right. But if you're pruning later in the fall, then by that time the tree is working on becoming dormant, and you're not going to have those
Excellent.
problems. Commercial orchards will do a lot of pruning in late summer and in the fall, simply because if they've got a lot of acres that they've got to cover, there's only so much time to do it. And to try and do that in a narrow window in late winter just isn't feasible.
Right,
So
right.
they get a good start on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there a certain way, or what branches should you look at maybe in anticipation of what you'd be doing in the fall?
Well, fall is a good time to take a look at the tree and kind of, take stock of how it looks like. Some of the things that I might look at are the overall shape of the tree. With an apple tree, you want it to be sort of pyramidal in shape, so that it's narrower on top than it is on the bottom. That way you get the most sunlight penetrating through the canopy of the tree, and that's the most healthiest. And also, you'd ideally want to have what they call a central leader, a strong central trunk. Okay. So once the leaves are off, you can get a better feel for what branches are out there, what the configuration is, and what should and shouldn't come out. Some of the things that I would look at to take out would be really large branches that are, say, at the top of the tree that are making things top heavy. Branches that don't have a lot of new growth on them except way, way, way out at the end. Or branches that are obviously damaged either by insects or disease, or if they've got large cracks in them, large splits in the bark, or if they've sustained some sort of physical damage from windstorms or something like that.
Now, by doing this, you're also preventing future damage.
Yes.
I think that's one of the
Yes.
things that you want to think about, is that you want to anticipate what's going to happen for future, not so much today, but
Right.
what's going to happen a year or even 2 or 3 years from now,
Right.
when you're talking about shape and things like that.
Right, and a crack in the bark might not really do that much damage now, but it's a place where diseases and insects can get in there and hang out and start feeding into the tree, and you wind up with a bigger problem later on down the road.
Right. So you, in your own yard, you may want to take a look around and see what really needs to just have a little bit of attention. As I said,
Yeah.
this tree that Johnny's working on, it hadn't been touched for years. And I can tell. We had a canopy. It was beautiful of grapevines. But the grapevines weren't doing anything, and the apple tree wasn't doing anything there. So that's what we want to do is make it positive for everything.
Right.
So there's apple trees. There's also, of course, all the other fruit trees. Are there any other bushes or any other plants that you think people might want to pay attention to in their yards?
For winter,
In
fall,
the fall,
or winter?
Is it a good time to cut things back? Like, I know that flowering shrubs,
Right.
If you cut off some of the limbs, you're cutting off some of the
Right.
flowers.
There are some flowering trees and shrubs that you do want to prune in the fall and winter, but it really depends on when they flower. Trees and shrubs that bloom earlier in the season, say before June 1st, are actually forming their buds the previous year. So those branches are forming flower buds in the fall that will then bloom early the following spring. And you're right, if you take off that growth, you're removing all the flower buds
Right,
with
right.
it. So those we would wait until after they flower, immediately after they flower. So say lilacs are ideally pruned in, say, the end of June. Okay. Shrubs that flower later in the season, late summer or even early fall, you can wait to prune. You can prune those in the fall or in early winter because they form their flower buds on that season's growth. They get a flush of new growth in the spring, and then flower buds develop that will then bloom later on in the season.
Right, right. So it's really getting to know what you have in your yard.
Yes.
That you can work with and have it, again, flourish so that your yard looks beautiful at the time of year when it's supposed to look beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so Carl, what are some of the pointers that you could give to people about pruning in the fall?
Well, for pruning in general, what I would say is it's really important to make the right kind of cut. You want to make a cut, you want to avoid what they call heading cuts, where you just take the tip of the branch and just cut the tip of it off.
So you don't want to cut it flat.
Exactly.
Okay.
You want to make a cut where a branch meets another branch. And the reason for that is if that I just make a cut here and leave a stump, there are buds that are dormant in there that will all of a sudden come out of dormancy, and you'll get this flush of growth, which on one hand looks really dense and might look nice, but it's really not the best. What you end up having is sort of with too many years of that, you get a dense shell of foliage on the outside of the tree, but a lot of nothing on the inside of the tree, and that's not healthy. You don't get good air circulation through the tree canopy. If it's a fruit tree, then all your fruiting wood is on the very tips of the tree, so it might be way out of reach rather than closer to where you can actually get at it.
Yep.
And a better thing to do is if you're pruning where a branch meets another branch, then you avoid that. If this is your main branch, rather than cut a stump here, you just cut it off here, then this becomes the dominant branch where the growth will continue, so you avoid that flush of growth out there.
Right.
The other thing is that when you're pruning a tree, especially with a mature tree, you don't want to prune too much in one year. Rule of thumb would be that you want to remove no more than, say, 30% of the tree in any one year. It's better for the tree to recover that way, and you'll avoid a lot of that water sprout kind of growth.
Right, right. I'm thinking back to, this is not an apple tree, but I had a butterfly bush in my yard.
Yep.
And I heard something on the radio one day, and they said, cut it back to 4 inches from the ground. And this was a really old butterfly bush. And so I cut it back, and what did I get? All these water shoots coming up,
Right.
and I'm hoping that it comes back, but that's a good example of massacring your tree and having it. It may come back. But.
Right. It will come back. And
Yeah.
a lot of times there's actually some butterfly bushes that tend to die back to the ground every year. So it might depend on the variety.
Right.
Even if you do get that big flush of growth and you get a lot of dense shoots coming up from the ground, if you just thin those out, maybe select, I don't know, half or a third of the strongest shoots that are coming up, and then just prune out the rest, you'll get good growth,
Right.
and it won't be too crowded in there.
Yeah, so you're almost starting fresh.
Yes.
Although it's not the prettiest site, but you are starting fresh, and so you're working with what you want to have the plant look like.
Right, and sometimes you need to do that, and some shrubs respond well to that. Butterfly bush, I imagine, would do okay with that.
Yep.
The only other thing that I'll make that I'll say as far as pointers go, a lot of people, especially when you're pruning a larger tree, they wonder if you need to treat the stump.
Right.
Paint on, you can get some sort of sealant or something. And not only is it not necessary, we really don't recommend it. A tree has the ability to heal over. There are hormones in there that will form this callus, this little collar around the cut. It dries out, and the tree will heal naturally that way. So it doesn't really need any help from us. And if you do treat the stump, sometimes that can kind of seal in things that you don't want to,
Right.
or again, you get cracks that can harbor pests later on down the road.
Right,
So
right.
leave it alone, the tree will be fine.
So you give classes here every once in a while, or
Yes. Yep.
And also, I don't know exactly what your schedule is, but what I would think is that they should contact you directly, or do you have a website?
We have a website. The extension website is extension.unh.edu, and then you can, from there, click on Cheshire County to come to the county website. You can also subscribe to our newsletters. We also try and put announcements in the local papers about different events that we've got going on. If all else fails, then absolutely give me a call,
Right.
and be happy to help you out.
Right, right. So you have a lot of things that you can offer for like pruning and things like that, but what are some of the other things that people might be interested in? I know that you used to do soil testing. I don't know if you still do
Right.
that, but
Well, yeah, we do. I mean, we do it all.
Right.
I work with home gardeners, so I teach people how to start their own transplants. I'll walk them through a soil test. When they get their soil test report back, I'll help identify bugs. I get that all the time. People come in with a jar full of bugs saying, "What is this? And do I
Right.
need to be worried about it?"
Right.
Everything in between.
yeah. Yeah. Well, another part of our show talks about bugs. So maybe we'll have you on for one of those shows in the future too.
Sure.
Jenna Spear is our co-host, and she just loves bugs. I, of course, love bees. But we know that there's good and bad bugs. There's ways to go about taking care of them.
Right.
And I'm sure that you have the safest ways possible.
Yes.
So good. But thank you, Carl, for talking with us today. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the future.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Okay.